You're hanging out in the House of Sunny podcast, where it's always sunny, mostly because of your host, comedian and YouTuber, Sunny Lohman. Want to know what Sunny and her friends are thinking about this week? Well, here she is, Sunny Lohman.
Hey everybody, welcome to the House of Sunny podcast. We're back after a pretty long absence, which for me just was because it was summer and my child was not in school. And I decided not to have a nanny for the first time in a while because I'm doing better physically and I just really want to spend time with my daughter. So I just put all of this on the back burner and we traveled. We did some traveling, and so cool. That's kind of where I've been. What about you, Doug? You've been busy.
Yeah, I've been very busy. Summer is
busy having fun at a grand lake cabin.
No, or lamenting the fact that you're not having fun. So it's hard to do anything. It's hard to be productive in the summer outside of just work and doing stuff with your family and stuff like that. So
that sounds like me. I remember when I was in college, when we were in college at the University of Minnesota, you know how in winter is so bad in Minnesota that when spring hits, you can't concentrate. And I had my very first year there, the last quarter, which was spring quarter. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a dummy, and I'm pretty organized and I'm pretty conscientious. And I realized I'm failing everything. Because I can't concentrate. And I took incompletes with all my classes. You get so many incompletes for your entire time at the University of Minnesota. I use them all.
Wow. That's terrible.
Yeah.
You must have had a boyfriend or something though, too. So something else.
Dude, I always had a boyfriend.
Well, there we go. So now we're talking.
But it was so beautiful out. I just wanted to be outside all the time. And yeah, it was just was difficult. It was difficult. I just wanted to be having fun. So anyway, I got better after that. But okay, that's not what we're here to talk about. We've got some sad news, and we're going to talk about that. You're going to get some sad news. Norm Macdonald died. 61 years old.
Oh my God.
And he's one of our favorites. You and I have always shared clips of him, and we'll put we're going to play a clip of our favorite bit or something today. We have so much to catch up on and talk about. And his jokes are often long because his setups, part of what's funny is that they're kind of rambling. And so when the punchline happens, it surprises you. And it's subtle. It's like he could just keep talking right over it. And you'd have to really be paying attention to catch it. So we're just going to put links to some of our favorite YouTube videos with clips of Norm in the show notes. I spent a significant
portion of my adult life on YouTube
watching
Norm Macdonald rabbit holes, just watching hours of Norm Macdonald.
Yeah.
He just puts me in such a good mood.
Yeah.
And he's so awesome. And it's truly an awful, I never react. There's probably 5 or 10 people in the world that I would react this way to, and he's one of them, of being genuinely upset about it,
And he's so young, and not only am I upset about how young he has died, but he's been battling this cancer, and I knew he was sick. You could tell just by looking at him. As a sick person, I know sickness. I see it, even though a person looks normal to other people, or just he just gained weight. There's a difference between sick weight gain and it's this sort of puffy, inflamed look.
Yeah,
and
he's on something.
He's on steroids or something that's caused it. A lot of drugs cause that kind of effect. And the other person that I've long thought was sick was Billy Crystal. And he never said anything about it publicly. I think he seems healthy now. But for about a decade, he didn't look the same, and his face was kind of round and weird, and yet his body was still skinny. So I've been noticing that Norm is sick, and I just feel like his career hasn't been going. I mean, he's had some fun things and he's doing things just like I do my podcast, but I could have been doing so much more by now if I wasn't sick. And what a loss it is that he wasn't in full health, doing the fullness of his capacity as a comedian.
Yeah.
I think he would have just grown and been much more popular than he was. He seemed to be kind of like an obscure comedian, actually. But if you ask any comic, they'll say he's the funniest guy.
Yeah, I know he had a gambling addiction. So yeah. I kind of thought he was like sort of depressed or mentally ill in some ways, just in some of the things he had gone through with his addiction and some of the cancel stuff that affected him. And I just thought he was taking a break. You could tell something was wrong with him, but you know, who knows as you get older. And it's a shock to me that he was dealing with that for 9 years. He told a story. We'll have to link to this too, because he actually, someone posted a little interview clip of him talking about, the title of the clip was Norm was foreshadowing his cancer. And he was talking about an actor from a film that he liked from years ago who had been dealing with cancer for many years and didn't tell his friends or his family or anyone, and performed in this film and then died shortly after that. And Norm really admired the fact that the guy this actor had been nominated for an Academy Award and he didn't get it. And Norm's like, if that guy had said he has cancer, they would have just given it to him. And he's like, I didn't want any of that kind of crap. So it was weird. He didn't say he was sick, but he was talking about this actor. And now in hindsight, obviously he was telling us that. But the fact that he didn't want to use that as a crutch or garner like fake sympathy. He just wanted to deal with it and just be taken on his own. Yeah. And evaluated and judged sort of on his own merits. And that's pretty heroic. I've seen a few people. I don't know could you do that? Like, well, obviously
I didn't do that.
We can't do it. I'd be like, hey, everybody.
I talk about being sick all the time. Does anybody want the Pred report?
Very heroic.
Yeah. I guess I admire that. But at the same time, I also admire people who come forward and talk about stuff, because I think, humans need connection, and it's nice to talk to people, to try to give people comfort who are sick, or that, they're not alone. And
think of the outpouring of affection he would have received.
Yeah, why not?
Now you've got thousands of people posting tributes and saying he's the greatest guy of all time. Don't you want to hear that when you're alive?
And not only that, but I think he would have been given more accommodation because, like you just said, you thought that he was like addicted to gambling and having personal problems and maybe mentally ill. Like, this is what you're thinking, and you're a big fan. Imagine what the agents and all the bookings and those people were thinking about him, when he could have just been like, yeah, I'm just really sick. So that's what's happening. Mm-hmm. And then he would have been forgiven for canceling things or whatever was going on. And I think that's kind of why I bring it up. I want people to know why I'm weird sometimes. Like, for me personally, I really needed to do the podcast because I needed to have an outlet. I needed to feel like I still had my foot in the world, but I also wanted people to know that, and I wanted to be able to joke about it. Yeah, I'm like Pred crazy right now. I had to, because otherwise people would just be like, wow, she's gone off the deep end. She's just so weird, and what's going on? And it gave me comfort to know that people would understand, I guess. Then I could relax a little bit more about it,
Yeah, totally.
But one thing I liked about Norm was how deep he was, like really intelligent, and most comics are, but he was so intellectual. And I just really liked that about him. A lot of his jokes were really smart, and even the ones that were really, he had a lot of inappropriate jokes, which I really liked about him. And he got kicked off of SNL. He got kicked off of, what was the other thing he got kicked off of?
Well, he had a pod. He did that thing for Netflix that they canceled, didn't they?
I mean, endless. He has been canceled so many times and fired because he had so much integrity and was like, I'm doing the jokes that are funny, even if it's going to offend the wrong people. Remember and that's why we talked about this on the podcast. Do you remember he went on The View and was a total pussy?
Yes, that pissed us off. Totally. Do you get calls from people all the time?
No.
That I don't know how to stop this. So, anyways, he got kicked off The View, and that was weird, wasn't it? When that happened, when he went back and sort of was apologetic. I'd never seen that.
He went back, and I'd never seen Norm. I was like, wow, what has happened? That Norm has come out here groveling in this way. It's just not like him because he was always so brave and kind of like the guy who just laughed at people who would cancel him. And you got that sense. And then here he was on The View just being like, I didn't mean to offend anybody and I'm really sorry. And
God,
it broke my heart. And I don't know what happened, but now thinking back, I realized, oh my God, the guy had cancer at that time, was fighting cancer. And those View bitches, the way they treated him, and then him having, I mean, what was that man going through at that time? And unreal. But anyway, sad day for comedy and for the world. He was one of the few comedians willing to buck the establishment. But a lot of comedians, all the big ones are big pussies. So sad loss. And just the loss of 10 years of him being at peak. So, all right. We'll put some links to YouTube videos of a few bits that we like. You sent me just recently a compilation that I was listening to. It was just 20 minutes of just joke after joke of his. I think you sent it to me just 2 months ago. Should put that one because that one was really funny.
I was just last week with friends and we were sitting around playing Norm Macdonald bits literally last week and just talking about him and laughing and just playing his stuff and sitting around the room listening. And it's just really weird, man. It's just shocking.
Yeah. No more new Norm material. That's sad.
He did a bit on coronavirus. That was one of his last big things. You can find that online. So he had a whole bit that he did on the coronavirus when it was really first happening in New York and stuff. It's great.
And he's just willing to to question things in an inappropriate way. He's such a good comic. All right. Moving on to, what should we do? Coronavirus, or do you want to do the Royal Report?
Do the Royal Report.
All right.
Now it's time for the House of Sunny's Royal Watch.
So, a couple of things. I mean, there's actually been a lot of stuff going on, like that weirdo plastic-faced British guy called Omid Scobie has written his second book, which is basically like he's like a ghostwriter for Meghan Markle. Everybody knows it. And so he writes these just poor, Meghan, she's been so mistreated, That's his whole books are supposedly real stories of Meghan being mistreated constantly. So that's how he's become famous is he's her little, that wasn't me. I didn't say that. Right. So he came out with a new book and whatever, boring. Now they've asked to have their baby that they inappropriately named Lilibet christened in the UK. They've asked the Queen to be there and she hasn't responded yet. So we'll see what happens. She's dragging out the response, which is funny. But what I really wanted to show you is this. I'm going to screen share. Let's see here. You got to see they're on the cover of Time magazine, and you have got to see this.
These are the worst human beings
freaking picture. You just will not even believe it. Wait, this is something else I'm going to show. Here we go.
That's not real.
Yes, that is freaking real. Look at that picture.
Seriously, man.
So just to get into it too, recently she turned 40 and she did this video with Melissa McCarthy, the comedian actress, where they were like Zooming or Skyping or something. And they were talking about her being 40 and she's in this like, you know, office out of a magazine. Nothing's out of place. Like she doesn't work there. It's just literally like a staged office. And she's sitting there in this beautiful cashmere, sitting in this perfect office, Zooming with Melissa McCarthy. Like this is her life. And
come on.
And as she's talking to Melissa McCarthy, in the background outside the window walks by Harry juggling, which he drops because he can't really juggle. And that was like apparently her idea. And Harry wasn't really very comfortable with it, but I guess he went along with it after some pressure from Melissa McCarthy. And everybody's talking about that as just an example of how he's just relegated to this outside clown. You know, he's not with her on her 40th birthday video. He's outside juggling and not even doing that well. And
performance art. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
He's
and
literally
now
juggling.
And yeah. And now look at this picture, which is her out front. This is Meghan Markle. She is a nobody. She is a D-list actress who married Harry. And look at this picture. She's out front. She's in white. He's wearing black, so he fades into the background. He's like, you know, her shadow and blends in with the trees while she's just standing there. Oh, look how powerful I am in my white suit, you know?
And look at his hand on her, like, and this is like the total role reversal. Like that's usually the feminine.
He's in a feminine position with his hand on her shoulder. He also appears to be, he's sitting on the wall, which makes him as tall as her, where he's normally much taller than her. He's sitting
down so that he's at the same level of her as her.
Yeah.
So and he's not towering above her.
And then he's got his hand kind of on her shoulder and she is out front. The front.
And look at her, like just her hips and stuff. She looks really robust, you know, like she's not feminine looking really at all. Except her face, I guess, and her hair a little bit, but her body and her stance and her clothes is really, it looks like it's like a jumpsuit.
Yeah.
And she looks kind of wide.
Yeah, she looks wide.
And you know, it's almost like a man's pleats or something, you know, like a heavy set middle-aged man's look.
Yeah.
Disgusting. I mean,
and
she's got that dumb twinkly look on her face that she always does. It's so like shallow.
It's just plastered there all the time. She's the worst. She's so fake. But poor Harry.
What do you mean, poor Harry? This guy is.
I know.
This guy's the biggest loser of all time. Who would do that?
He's the biggest loser. So I have been listening to this. I've found this new favorite commenter on the royal stuff. His name is H.G. Tudor, and he's a British guy who claims to be a narcissist psychopath. And he's like, I'm a narcissist psychopath, and I will be analyzing Meghan Markle, you know, because it's interesting.
It takes one to know one kind of a thing.
She's a narcissist, but she's not an aware narcissist, whereas he's an aware narcissist, which makes him he calls it an ultra.
Authority figure.
And he's so freaking funny. And he'll say stuff like, he'll be analyzing some videotape of the two of them walking around, and Harry shows up and he's like, and there's Harry asking his friend if he has a blue marker because his dried out and he really needs to finish that sky painting. It just like totally talk about Harry being stupid in that way. It's so funny. Anyway, I was just here he is analyzing
what they ate for dinner last night, or maybe, have you heard? There's this chap called Tudor. His videos are excellent. You should listen in, you know. You learn quite a bit. Yes, I've heard them there.
He's pretending to do their conversation.
Or quite possibly they're discussing the fact
they're all talking about him.
Yeah.
His heels. Who knows? But they're not, of course, the subject of our analysis. We move to the rear of the photograph, And there, in emerald green, sits Harry's wife.
Oh, he only ever calls her Harry's wife. He never says her name. And this, look at this. The title of this video is Harry's Wife, part 72.7.
Part 2. Part 2 of part 72.7.
Part 7 of 72.7 or 72. Oh, yeah. Is this part 2? No, part 72.7.
Part 2 of that.
He has done more than 72 videos about Meghan Markle or Harry's wife.
Wow.
Freaking
so
hilarious.
Obsessed. This is awesome.
Oh, but it's so funny. And they're short. And he'll milk one topic with like 5 or 6 points, 72.7. He'll do a bunch of, part 72 about the same issue.
Aren't there some people that like just take the role on of being like a royal or something, and they look the part? She looks so costumed and so phony and so actressy in that. Look at that outfit.
Yeah.
Like if you saw her in a movie wearing that, I'd be like, nah, she's not. She doesn't really look like a princess.
Yeah.
She's trying to be.
So if you're really interested, which probably most of you are not, go check out HG Tudor's videos. They're just hilarious, actually. But they're kind of interesting, too. It's pretty obvious that she's a narcissist. And I mean, I've definitely had narcissists in my life. And I think it's true that analyzing these people it's kind of helpful in your own life for identifying when you're around a narcissist. There's another guy, I'm sure a lot of you know about this. There's a podcast video series or a guy who's doing, his name is Josh Slocum, and he does a podcast called the Disaffected Podcast. And his whole thing is he grew up in a family with a narcissist psychopath mother. And he was a liberal for a long time. And he has flipped, because what he says is, I can see that we're being treated like the way the manipulation tactics of personality disordered people is what's happening to Americans. And he goes into it in depth all over the place. It's really interesting. And it's true. It's like if you just think about these abuse dynamics and the manipulations that happen, the government's doing that to us.
Oh, yeah. And like an abused wife at this point.
Yeah. And when he realized that, it was before COVID, during the Trump administration.
We're just doing this because we love you.
Yes.
We won't do it again.
But also,
I'm better now.
Here's flowers. Tomorrow I smack you. So I think that's a really interesting take. And he's a really smart guy. So he's someone to check out too. Okay, let's get into COVID. So I don't know how, I don't know if we want to do just a general update. I feel like if you are smart and you're paying attention, your whole take on COVID has evolved, and it evolves every month because it's a new disease and data has been coming out this whole time. When we first became aware of this in January and we first started talking about this, I think we were early. I would say, some of the earliest people talking about this is coming. It's here, it's spreading, it's contagious. There were all kinds of confused things coming out about it. We didn't know what we were facing. We realized in February, early March, that the CDC didn't know what the hell they were doing. They had no plan. Or it appeared that way, like, what the heck is going on? Why isn't anybody doing anything? And this is going to kill 3-4 million people in the United States, which turned out to be wrong. I'm glad that turned out to be wrong, but nobody's adapting to that. Nobody's adapting to things changing, to treatments being discovered, to the severity of the illness not being the same. And then we find out that cases can't be trusted. And even mainstream press is coming out with this stuff now. Atlantic did some kind of big study that they printed recently that analyzed January 21, which is before vaccines were widespread, right? So it's the first month of vaccines. They analyzed the cases, quote unquote, all the cases, I think in like a couple states, and found out that like a huge proportion of them were not cases where the person was in the hospital for COVID. They were there and had COVID. So you come in for some other problem and you end up getting tested and you have it. You go on the list as a case, even a hospital case. Okay. So when they say people hospitalized for COVID, it was a big lie and still is. So nothing can be trusted. It's very, very difficult to figure out what the risk is to yourself. And then in the midst of this, we have a lot of people who don't do the work and they're terrified and they're listening to mainstream press, which has for some reason, an obsession with keeping everybody terrified. And for some reason, we know the reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now everybody wants these vaccines. It's all about these vaccines. And my attitude about the vaccines is it's nobody's business if I'm vaccinated or my family's vaccinated. This is private medical data. And I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how to handle that because it's getting increasingly required everywhere you go now. And I don't know, the really, really, I don't know, it wasn't that shocking, but the Ayn Rand Institute required vaccination of its staff. So employers mandating vaccinations is spreading, and you have a lot of people that don't want this or medically can't have this. And just to give you guys an idea of what it is like to have an autoimmune disease, sometimes like the smallest shred of something will trigger your autoimmune disease. Like if I had an Advil, Advil is known to cause problems for people, especially if you're sick. One Advil could throw me into like a couple of days of misery and pain. And I know people who, if they're prescribed a medicine, they have to go out of their way and get it compounded and make it in a way so that the delivery system of that medicine doesn't harm them, because they're so sensitive to just that gel coating on a vitamin could keep them sick or trigger their illness. So they get special vitamins and special medications. And you're going to force them to be injected with something that has a delivery system and it's like, it's medicine that how dare you? These people are fighting for their lives. And you can get a medical exception. Okay, so walk into any mainstream medical place and go, I'm having trouble with this gel coating around this vitamin. And they'll go, oh, yeah, right. No, there's no double-blind study supporting that. So that can't really be true. That's
Exactly.
Mainstream medicine. So how are you supposed to get a doctor who's going to stick their neck out and give you a medical exemption? And I'll tell you what happened here in California. They mandated vaccines here for all children. The full CDC schedule. We're one of the few states that has mandated those. And the way they sold this to the people was, you can get medical exceptions. And then literally the day it went into effect, they started suing doctors and threatening their licenses, all doctors who gave medical exemptions. And I personally know of a pediatrician that stopped giving medical exceptions on the day that they received their notification that they were being investigated. And so you have this group of doctors willing to give exemptions, then they're all sued, then they stop giving exemptions because they're fighting a lawsuit and they're fighting for their license and their livelihood. And so suddenly, in the entire state of California, you could not get a medical exemption.
Wow.
So that's how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is bullshit that you can get a medical exemption. That is bullshit. That is not true. You will never get a medical exemption. And there are people you will kill with this stupid vaccine. Unbelievable. I mean, just look at Eric Clapton's story and what happened to him. If you have a reaction to the first shot, and you know that you can't get the second shot or the booster, they're still going to make you take it because you don't get to have a medical exemption, because no doctor will give one, because they'll get sued and they'll lose their license.
One size fits all medicine.
You absolutely cannot pass these mandates. Must be vigorously fought. It will kill people. If you really care about people's health and you really want to help people, mandating medicine is a killer. I can't even believe we're having this conversation in the United States of America. Mandating medicine? What the hell are you thinking? And I'm seeing objectivists, supposed freedom fighters, saying, oh, but it's a private company. This is the argument again. Private companies can mandate vaccines, especially hospitals and schools should. Why? Because kids are not at risk. So why should schools mandate vaccines for children? You know, now they want to mandate it for teachers, but as soon as it's approved for kids, they'll mandate it for kids. Kids don't even get this virus. And if they do, they don't get severe COVID. So it is just bullshit, up one side and down the other. And it's government bureaucrat making a decision, wanting to because the pharmaceutical company put some money in their pocket, probably. I mean, and because it increases their control over people. This is so sick. And any company that doesn't stand up to this shit, and I'm so sickened that ARI is one of these companies that didn't stand up and go, we will not mandate vaccines. If you're afraid of COVID, get vaccinated. Wear an N95. Simple.
Yeah. What do you
take care of yourself? These vaccines we know now that these vaccines do not minimize contraction or spread. They only minimize severity. So they're good. They're good for certain groups, including groups like me, like a vulnerable person. I was one of the top 3 vulnerable categories last year. I'm not old, I'm not obese, but I was on prednisone. And that is the number 1 immune suppressor that puts you in danger of severe COVID. So I was right up there with the 85-year-olds. And in that case, a vaccine is a smart idea, maybe. You got to weigh it. I'm not saying everyone like that, but for people like me, it was a good idea. For people who are not at risk, maybe not such a good idea. So everybody needs to make that decision for themselves with their doctor, but also for themselves. Even if their doctor says, no, I don't agree. Fuck them. Because I can tell you right now, most doctors don't think, and they don't stick their necks out, and they do what they're told. That's because government has regulated medicine so bad that finding a real thinking doctor is a rare thing. They're out there and they're the ones being canceled on YouTube and they're in private practice. So they don't have the prestige. They're not at the John Hopkins, blah, blah, blah. Because if they were, they'd have to toe the line because their whole livelihood would depend on that. So they're in these independent practices because they got out of these corporate environments because they don't let you practice medicine. And they're the ones speaking out, making YouTube videos, doing whatever they can to try to stop this because they know it's harmful. Like you said, the medicine, one size fits all. It's a killer. It's a killer. A bigger killer than COVID. Did you know the 3rd leading cause of death is medical error? Proven medical error is the 3rd. It's heart attacks. I forget what number 2 is. And 3 is medical error. And you want to give the bureaucrats a top-down communist approach to medicine and inject people with stuff the bureaucrats decide is everyone should have this. This is communism in medicine. And the Ayn Rand Institute is just fine with that.
It's absolute tyranny. The question of the efficacy of the vaccine and how it should be deployed and for whom is a choice to be made by an individual in consultation with medical professionals. The idea that any medicine, that there's a one-size-fits-all protocol for every single individual in the United States is ridiculous on the surface, on its face. I mean, Imagine the commercials that we always see on drugs, right? You know, on a TV commercial, whatever, Keytruda or one of these drugs, Abilify. It's like side effects may include, and they go through the list of all the side effects. Imagine if that a drug company said, there are no side effects. This is safe and effective. Bam, you're done. Take it. Must take it. Everybody must take it. I mean, that is so absurd on its face. Of course, every medicine has a potential for risk and a potential for side effect.
Has a side effect. If you have a bleeding disorder, you can't take an aspirin. You can't take any Advil. If acetaminophen, Tylenol. I mean, these are very benign drugs. They have serious consequences for some people.
That's why every individual is different. And once you know your own medical history and your own situation, you can then decide for yourself whether the risk of a severe adverse event is worth it relative to the benefit of the vaccine. And the idea that the government is going to mandate, you know, based on this sort of like dogmatic analysis of the data that everyone should get this is beyond anything I've ever seen in my lifetime. I mean, and by the way, you could, as you've said, you can I understand enough about and have done a ton of research on this. So I know enough about the efficacy of the vaccine, particularly with vulnerable populations like the elderly or whatever, or immune suppressed. And so there are definitely great arguments in favor of taking the vaccine. But when you stratify the data and you look at the risks of particularly young people as you get older, the absolute risk of a severe case relative to the risk of a severe adverse event, you know, you have to weigh that. That's a real thing. And to just have a one size fits all, whether you're 10 years old or whether you're 90 years old. I'm
kind of sick of talking about these details too. I mean, there's so much data out there. Here's what it comes down to. People have a right to be wrong. People have a right to be superstitious about it and go, no, I don't want it. People have the right to refuse it no matter what the hell their reason. But if you're smart and you're rational and you are paying attention, you realize that another person taking the vaccine impacts nobody but themselves, because it doesn't change spread and it doesn't change contraction. So you don't affect anybody if you aren't vaccinated. You have no effect on other people.
Yeah, and how does not taking the vaccine affect you? You're vaccinated. You're safe.
Yeah, supposedly. It's not right. It is not right. Nobody is a threat to you and even if you go back and you think about before COVID, all these other possible diseases that you could get if you're not vaccinated or whatever, like, you know, I don't think I ever had measles. I had the vaccine for it before college or something. I haven't had any boosters. I suppose I could get measles and nobody cares about that.
What about the flu?
The flu? That kills people?
Not to mention many, many people who have had COVID have natural immunity. They already have the antibodies.
Right.
And so they could be at potentially much higher risk of a severe event or adverse event to the vaccine if they take the vaccine. So natural immunity has been shown to be more durable protection anyway. So how in the hell can you tell someone who's literally, and I've been talking to people, and we'll get into this in a little bit, some of the groups I'm involved with the doctor group. And so I'm talking to doctors all the time. I mean, there are literally doctors who have had COVID and measured themselves like, here, I have the antibodies right here. No, got to take the vaccine.
Yeah.
It's like just a government rule. Like you have to take it.
Well, that came up apparently with ARI. They were mandating it for staff, and they were also treating attendees differently depending on their vaccine status. So if you were unvaccinated, wanted to go to their summer conference, you had to take like a PCR test within 72 hours or something. And the PCR tests are very questionable. First of all, we know that. And this woman in the Ocon group says, I just recovered from COVID. I have the antibodies. I'm not going to get the vaccine. And I don't, what if you give me a PCR test and I have like this tiny little bit of virus? Do I not get to go to the conference? Like, I'm one of the most safe people, right? Because I just had COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So it's totally irrational. It is like literally a religious superstition, the way these vaccines are being treated. And moreover, so that's one, like it's completely irrational. And number two, it's nobody's fucking business, like mind your own business. And that used to be the order of the day, and it's not anymore. And we've got to get back to that. Mind your own business. I want to tell you, I couldn't have been more vulnerable last year, right? I was nervous about it. Every time I went inside, and at first I remember thinking, geez, I wish people would wear their masks, and getting kind of stressed out about it. And then I realized I can't control other people, and I'm not going to walk around causing myself stress because I can't control what other people are doing. That's just going to make me twist up in anger and fear, And I realized, okay, take a deep breath. What do I need to do to control my risk as much as possible for me and my family? And whenever any member of my household went inside anywhere, they wore an N95 mask. And we sanitized groceries and did crazy stuff like that, which looking back now, I know, didn't make a difference. But until I knew scientifically that it wasn't going to make a difference, I did it. And we kind of kept our socializing to outside. So, and we live in California, and thankfully we were able to do that. But the point is that that's the American way. You figure out, what do I need to do to protect myself and my family, and leave other people alone. You can't control them. It's none of your business. If they're doing the wrong thing or making a bad decision, tough. That's life. And that's what it means to live in a community with free people. That's what that means. You just have to be okay that they're being stupid or whatever. Sorry, unless they're really harming you in some kind of aggressive initiation way, you don't get to say. You know what I mean? In the history of America, there were worse viruses than this, and nobody said the Constitution says the government can do what it's doing.
Well, they've quarantined people. I mean, I think the protocol was more like, if you're known to be very sick and very contagious, there's some argument for, quarantining people that are very sick. In this case, you are quarantining and isolating people that are healthy. That's shutting down society, requiring people to wear masks that don't work. I mean, if you required people to wear N95s, I would be like, well, okay, that actually works. But it's still wrong to do this, but at least like it would work. The things they're requiring today are they're literally religious theater, they're like burqa. They're like American burqas, where you're offering a symbol of moral purity, and you're displaying a symbol of obedience to authority.
100%. And when you walk around now and you see people half are masked, half aren't masked, the ones that are masked are the ones that have definitely had the vaccine. They're the ones that are
they're protected.
It's a signal. It's not, they're not worried about COVID. They're worried about what you'll think of them or their neighbors or the authorities. And I'm pure and I'm obedient. Yeah.
I'm not one of these deplorables that think for themselves. The epistemology is, the idea that, once again, we see this haunting us everywhere, this idea that science is a doctrine. It's a dogmatic doctrine of higher truths, as opposed to a process to ascertain truth. Think of what we've learned about this stuff in the last 2 years, and how much initial theorizing and how many hypotheses turned out to be not true or contradicted by the data. And so the idea that there is a one size fits all and the debate is over is preposterous and is very dangerous. And
it's very dangerous.
And the fact that when these people say, well, some of these doctors agree. Well, first of all, most of the doctors and researchers that disagree have been suppressed, silenced, or fired or canceled in some way. So you have to go seek out people that dissent. And I know personally from people that are in these hospital systems, because they're friends of mine, they are implicitly threatened. The dummies, so many doctors are dummies. They just accept the CDC guidance or whatever their medical association tells them to say. They're not thinking. They're not even doing. I know more, and I'm sure a lot of you that have done your own research on this or have some sort of scientific background at all probably know more than a lot of doctors do. I've talked to a lot of doctors who don't know the first thing about this. They just say, well, we were told to do this. We were told to say this.
That's right.
So they're dummies just reciting things. The real researchers and the people that know this stuff, okay, they could have an informed, interesting opinion, and many of them disagree on the nuance. And you could litigate that forever. And I have, get really into the weeds on, who it affects and how it affects and like the best strategies for deploying these vaccines, all this kind of stuff. And there hasn't been a debate. The debate isn't over because the debate never began.
There is no debate. And if I don't know, maybe I pay more attention than most people. I know I do. So I'm trying to be gracious and patient with people who still say, for example, that like I went to the doctor the other day and I had to go in a little room with someone and she said, you don't have to wear your mask. I'm vaccinated. This was a nurse. And I'm like, but your vaccine status does not protect me. So it's actually really dangerous that people don't understand this.
Yeah.
Because if I were really ill and really vulnerable and she thinks I'm vaccinated, I'm protecting you. It doesn't protect me, honey.
That's right.
I need to keep my N95 on, because you could have it and you could be spreading it and you could be, a little sick and not even realizing it. So it's so dangerous.
That's right. All it's shown to be is it protects you from severe cases. The best data I've seen, out of Israel has shown that the rate of severe cases, the chance of you getting a severe case in a hospital drops if you take the vaccine in relative terms. However, if you're 30 years old, you have they had a 6 out of 100,000, 0.006% risk of a severe case. And yes, if you take the vaccine, that risk is probably less than 1. So your efficacy is 90%. It went from 6 out of 100,000 to like 1 out of 100,000. Okay. But your absolute risk is still really low. It's like 6 out of 100,000. And
yes,
that goes up over time. That goes up with age. But even if you're 50, your risk is 0.04% of a severe case versus, maybe 90% better if you take the vaccine. So absolutely the vaccine has been shown to be efficacious, but your absolute risk is still fairly low if you're young. And then you have to weigh that against the potential for serious adverse reaction to the vaccine. So there is a risk to taking the vaccine as well as a benefit, and you have to weigh that. And the idea that the idea that everyone must take this and if you take the vaccine, you're protected is ridiculous. And you do notice they changed the CDC changed the definition of what a vaccine is. They said a vaccine, they changed it from providing immunity to providing protection. They literally changed the definition of
and if you think about the fact
which is fine, but just admit it, just be honest.
but
science.
The problem with that is, I don't think it's fine, because the problem with that is people go, I'm vaccinated.
I mean, if you admit
you're protected. Nurses and people thinking that, and they're around vulnerable people, and they believe that they're telling you and advising you, oh, you're really vulnerable. Don't worry, I'm vaccinated. It is a flaw. It is deadly. That idea that they've spread will end up hurting more people, and not just forcing them to take vaccinations and getting hurt with adverse events, but hurting people because now those people think that they're like protecting everybody, and they're not. So,
my friend took his kids into a pediatrician, and he said, well, what about natural immunity? That provides more, that's been shown to provide more durable immunity than these vaccines. And there's risk with the kids taking these. And she had to really think about that. Like I don't think she really understood. It's very possible that she doesn't understand how natural immunity works.
Yeah.
I mean, there are literally doctors and medical professionals that I don't think understand that when you get a disease, you develop immunity from it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how dumb some of these people are. Like to your point, Sonny, like she thinks she's vaccinated, so she can't spread it, which is not what they're saying at all.
No.
She's protected potentially
she's
from
protected
a
herself.
severe case in a hospital, but she's not, she can spread it.
She can absolutely spread it. And at the same rate as the unvaccinated. So it's not even that she's spreading it less. She's spreading it the same amount. And so, but all of this is like noise.
Yeah.
I feel like we live in the United States.
Gorilla
free
in the room
people.
Is freedom.
We're free people. And if you don't like that you can't control your freaking neighbor, go find a place where, well, you won't. Somebody else will still do it. It'll still be top down, and they're going to make bad decisions, and you're going to end up living in Venezuela. So, or a Venezuela-like place. I mean, it's freedom has a cost.
We're getting so distracted by the noise of the argument, and it's because it's just like environmentalism. It's like you get into the weeds about like instead of just saying, wait a second, like no, the government can't throttle industrial civilization based on a scientific theory.
Right.
Just like, no, the government, you can't herd people into hospitals and force them to take experimental medicines and injections. It's just.
Heart disease is the #1 killer of Americans. They can't force us to take aspirin every day. You know, that would be wrong. And it would hurt people. And and in general, it would just be wrong. It's
side effects to aspirin, you know?
But in general, it's, hey, you don't get to tell me to take an aspirin every day. Who do you think you are? But anyway, Joe's patience is wearing thin with us. So maybe we should rethink this.
Did you see that? Yeah. Play that black woman's video from TikTok about Joe's patience. Did you see that woman?
No.
He said, your patience is wearing thin? Who the fuck you think you're talking to?
I didn't see that. I need to see that.
The best response to that I've ever seen.
If you can find it.
It's on my Rational Capitalist page.
It is? Okay, I'm going to go there right now and find it. There's also another thing that was really heartening to me. I was just going to mention it, and I'll include a link. But it's a Facebook link. But it's this news organization, and we've seen this before. We saw this with Trump stuff, and we've seen this all throughout the vaccine, where news organizations ask you to message them if you fit their story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not, message me if you've had the vaccine, but message me if you've had the vaccine and whatever. Like they're looking for a specific angle, and they want to make that happen. So here, I'll share this with you. I can't believe I'm sharing my Facebook.
They want to exacerbate their fallacy of false generalization by finding biased samples of some narrative.
They're looking for a biased sample.
And then
to prove their narrative.
Yes.
To make a news story.
Great.
So here it is. WXYZ TV channel. And maybe this will turn out to be fake. I don't know, but it's ABC. After the vaccines were available to everyone, did you lose an unvaccinated loved one to COVID? If you're willing to share your family's scary story, please DM us your contact information. So they're looking for people who unvaccinated loved ones who died.
Confirm their bias. Yes.
They don't want to show adverse events who died, only unvaccinated people who died. And the comments section is gold. It's real sincere. Like, what are you talking about? Why are you doing this? No, but I've lost several loved ones to hospital negligence because of hospitals being short-staffed and tyrannical hospital policies. Also, one of them died alone because his wife wasn't allowed to visit them. Would you like to talk to me? Like, it's that. And
I also know 3 people who killed themselves.
Yeah, it just makes you, I know nobody who's been seriously injured by COVID itself, but I know someone who died of the second vaccine.
Well, there's a guy who put a poll in here somewhere, Sonny, that someone highlighted, and it was, how many of you have had someone die of the vaccine, and how many of you know someone who's died of COVID? And it was like over 1,100 had said they knew someone who died of the vaccine, and like 200 knew someone who died of COVID. So it was like 5 to 1.
Yeah.
So that's, and the VAERS system, of course, we have a self-reporting database in the United States. The other thing I wanted to mention before I forget, because you had alluded to this before, is in talking to some politicians and some other doctors about this issue, and with respect to the private company debate, the hospital associations get 2/3 probably of their funding from the federal government. So most of these hospital groups are totally sucking at the tit of the federal government in terms of like Medicare reimbursements and all this stuff that they get, and emergency COVID stuff. So they are not at all.
They're not free. They're not
free at all.
And they also, their whole right to operate could be taken away from them with the smallest bureaucratic peep.
And two other things on that. It turns out that the hospital groups donate a lot of money, obviously, to the political parties. And so if you want to affect some sort of change legally in your area, well, guess what? The hospital associations have donated many more millions than you're going to be able to donate, I guarantee you, to your congressperson.
Yeah.
And the hospital associations are getting federal funding.
Yeah.
So they're using federal funding to then pay off politicians. So
to fund politicians. It's a total circle.
This is not a free market. On top of that, there's a federation of state medical boards that is threatening doctors with their licenses, as you alluded to before. So if you spread what they're calling misinformation, they can yank your license. And of course, misinformation means just disagreeing with the hospital association's take, even if so. We need right of conscience type legislation, immediately to free doctors and liberate and unmuzzle doctors to be able to speak freely about this stuff.
Yeah.
And we're fighting for that.
People need to wake up and stop supporting this BS. And when an organization like the Ayn Rand Institute and, Reason and the libertarian organizations are all the same, where they're saying, no, it's a private company. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I had an ARI intellectual said to me on Facebook the other day that more businesses should mandate the vaccine, but it was wrong for the government to do it. And I started arguing with him about it. And he brought up, well, especially hospitals and schools. I'm like, those are the most regulated, non-private places. Well, I'm sure you could find a private school that doesn't mandate vaccines. I'm like, maybe one or two, and they don't necessarily want to, but if you're 10% of the schools out there, and probably they get federal funding in some way or another, and more often than not, they're getting a lot of social pressure because all the other schools are doing it. Are my kids not safe? Because it's propaganda everywhere, right? Is this the video, Doug?
No,
woman
that's
kicked
another
off
one.
plane.
No, that's another one. Keep going. Right there, that woman. Yeah.
Okay, let's hear it. It's on Twitter. Okay. Hang on.
Fool talking about my patience is wearing thin. Who the fuck you talking to? As long as your patience don't get as thin as that hairline, I think we'll be all right. I am not your child. And I'm sure enough ain't your bitch. You talking about your patience is wearing thin. These people have law. They acting like they, you know what I'm saying? Like they paying your bills and dicking you down. You got to watch you fool.
Dicking you down?
I saw that little clip. I said, oh, he's crazy. He really think he really think I'm his hoe. My patience is wearing thin. I need you to get out on that boulevard and bring me my money. You ain't my pimp, nigga. What the hell is wrong with these people? He really said that shit out of his mouth. But our patience is wearing thin. You bald head. See, I'm trying. I thank God. See, that's Danny calling me right now, trying to save my mouth.
That's great.
One thing I wanted to say too is, in order for the vaccine companies to have an emergency use authorization, there couldn't be any efficacious treatments like the ivermectin and all that stuff. And so they had a financial incentive, a massive financial incentive to suppress any study that would show efficacy on the part of these natural, or on the part that would show efficacy on the part of these treatments. And so are you really, when you go to your doctor, are you really getting, like, first of all, the studies can't even be done. They're mostly being done outside the United States. Anyone that talks about them is shut down or accused of spreading misinformation. The FDA came out and said it was horse paste, which is just frightening,
The
horrifyingly,
FDA.
chillingly.
And not only did they say it's horse paste, they were mocking
anyone, yeah.
people. And they said, y'all, like, I wish I could find that. I'm
And,
sure
and I
everyone
do,
here
and,
has
and
heard
I
about
also know
this.
that doctors that have, if they prescribe ivermectin, even if the Walgreens, for example, as a corporation, won't even fill the prescription as a corporate policy without even knowing the indication. So even if it's for a parasite or something like that, they won't fill it.
I've been hearing a lot of stories about that too. And not only that, but people with lupus take it regularly. It tends to help with lupus, and that's been known for a while. So there are many uses of this.
It won the Nobel Prize. Well, and the thing is so what I wanted to just say is the idea of there being a free market in this is absolutely ridiculous. Like there's an FDA that's likely corrupted through the influence of these financial incentives of these companies and these global health organizations. And so are we really getting the true story? Are you really going to hear how beneficial one of these other treatments can be when you're faced with pharmaceutical companies who have trillion-dollar incentives to get their drugs to market, with an FDA that's corrupted, who's then advising the federal government, who then gives money to state hospitals and state medical providers, who then give money to political parties? I mean, this is fascism.
It's total fascism.
And you have to recognize the reality of this. That's objectivity.
Right. I thought this was, yes, that's objectivity. The reality of the situation is we are living in a predominantly fascist country at this point. Okay, here's the FDA thing. I'm going to share this in case people didn't see this. It's worth looking at. Oh, wait a sec. That's not what I meant to share. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. So here's a picture of a doctor with a horse and a picture of a doctor with a person. And the article is why you should not use ivermectin to treat or prevent COVID-19. And that's on the FDA.gov website. That's a link to the FDA Gov. And then the caption is, the tweet is, you are not a horse. You are not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it. This is the FDA that has approved ivermectin for human use for what?
It's been used for billions of cases.
For 50 years, 40 years or something like that, at least 30.
And apparently we shouldn't drink milk either because we're not cows.
Well, but they know better is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the FDA. They know what this drug is. So this is them mocking people who are using ivermectin, which they know works for a variety of human conditions. I mean, it's sickening. And the fact that there are still people who believe in these institutions and this bullshit. Stop it, y'all. Just stop it.
Stop it. That's all science. Right. That's what the science says.
All right. So quickly, I think we'll do maybe next week. We'll talk to you more in depth about this because we are hitting up against an hour here. But just quickly, so Doug has been doing some local stuff that I think you're encouraged by. Like, I think you're still flip-flopping. Some days you're like, America's done. And then the next day you're like, oh, I just was at this great meeting and we had this great result.
Well, those are not mutually exclusive positions, because I think America is done. And that's why I think it's even more important to fight at your state level, because that's what's going to be left will be your local situation. And you're going to have to determine whether or not you need to move or not, depending on how bad. Florida, for example, is fine right now, and they have a good governor who has a lot of power. So there's some states that are excellent. Now, to your point, though, what I've been doing, with our local push that we've been talking about for a long time, is I ended up forming, and I'll get you the details on this in the coming weeks because I don't have my website fully constructed. I want to be able to direct people to all this stuff when I get it done. But I hooked up with a lot of local political people, physicians group. I've been talking to some state legislators in my area, and I'm forming what's called a C4. It's a nonprofit organization that what it does is, instead of a PAC where you have to report all your donors, a C4 allows you to receive donations anonymously. The catch is you can't give money to candidates. You have to do public education and things like that. But anyways, there's organizational ways you can do a nonprofit and still be and run sort of an organization like this. And what I'm going to focus on is I'm spotlighting, the mission of my organization is to spotlight and highlight local political issues in my region and support candidates that guard our life, liberty, and prosperity. So what we're seeing locally is sort of like liberal and leftists coming in and making a concerted push to take over school boards, take over city councils, take over county boards. They're getting in at all these different levels. And so, and oftentimes
They've been doing that for quite a while, but I know the attorney general thing was pushed a few years ago, and that seemed ominous. And then in the last, and we've talked about this on our show, that there was this recent push to take over city councils, and they want to bring in this CRT stuff and all this equity bullshit everywhere, not just in schools, but everywhere.
Absolutely. And this is how you can really, really make a difference. And I'm saying this not only because it can make it makes a difference to your life, because these boards and stuff really control what's going on locally. But realistically, you can make a difference because so few people get involved in local politics. Like a handful of people can show up at this stuff, and all of a sudden you're talking to, all of a sudden you're friends with the mayor, and you're friends with seriously, there's not that many people involved. But the point is that a lot of people, if you're like a lot of people, the day before a local election, you call your friend and say, who should I vote for the school? Who should I vote for? Because usually these are, a lot of times they're nonpartisan positions, and they're very vague, but these people really are partisan. So they'll have a very vague platform. I want to help the city, or I want to help the kids.
Help students learn.
But really they're CRT people, or they're woke progs or whatever. So what we're doing with our site and our organization is we're going to have a list of all the political positions all across our area, council seats, board seats, school boards, of all the different regions and areas, as far as I can go with this. And we're going to have ratings, and we're going to interview people on a podcast. We're going to keep a website, and we're going to keep track of this. And so you come to our site the day before an election, and you could say, who does Doug think are the best candidates in these areas?
If you could scale this, that would be so interesting, wouldn't it? If you could be a hub where people can go and you find, they can sign up to be the person who does the podcast for their little region. And
that's what I want to do. This is a template. I think
someone
was already telling me, oh, you got to do this across our entire state. And I was like, well, let me start locally, because that's the whole point. And then someone else can do it in another region, another region, another region.
Yeah.
And I want these, I don't want to give you it's sort of a watch type organization and a watch type theme that I'll be revealing. But I've already got people on city councils and stuff that are dying to get in and do podcasts. I know I've made a lot of really good contacts in this regard. And I'm also part of this physicians group that has been, we're going to be getting a lot of publicity.
Who organized that? Did someone else, did a physician pull this together, or?
Yeah, in my area, and again, we'll give details about this later, but there was a physicians group, and they kind of got dormant over the last few years. And in the wake of all the stuff that's happening, they sort of resurrected. And I'm friends with a lot of doctors just on a social level.
Oh, are you? You're so elite.
From the country club, No, I happen to be friends with a couple of these guys. And so they brought up the idea of the group again. And they started soliciting more and more and more people, and started to really blow up. And we ended up meeting with a local legislator who is really excited about it and wants to bring it to a much higher level. Because my idea was, these doctors are being muzzled and suppressed, and they need some sort of legal means possibly to be protected, so that they can speak out and we can have a really rational, open, scientific debate without fear of retribution from state medical boards and from these hospital systems and from being blacklisted from employment, which is a real threat. You know,
I've been hearing, I think last week this happened. A lot of people received a letter from their licensing agency telling them that if they said anything against these vaccines, that they would lose their license.
Yes.
And this is across the country. This suddenly happened. I heard this from you. I heard this from a bunch of people.
Yeah, a doctor showed me the letter that he got, and it was coming from this Federation of State Medical Boards, that is some sort of pseudo organization that claims to represent these boards. But yeah, they're threatening doctors,
the licenses of doctors for saying anything skeptical, or even just saying to a patient, I don't know if you should get this because you have this and that complication, and I don't think this would be healthy for you.
Exactly. Exactly. And so when you go to your doctor now, you cannot be sure that they are telling you what they really think, because they are under orders and they're being threatened. So you're talking to someone with a muzzle on, that has a gun to his head. And now if you get him at a party or you're having a few drinks, maybe he'll tell you what he really thinks of this. But I guarantee you that 90% of these people will not tell you what they think if they work for one of these systems. So you have to go to like a totally independent doctor, and even they can be threatened.
I think we've all realized that the sort of heroic quality that is rare and difficult to find is courage and like bravery. It's really hard to go against the crowd and the consequence, facing real harmful consequences in your life. So I kind of, in a way, I think it's bullshit, and I think that they're pussies, but there are not that many people who will stick their neck out. And that goes for doctors. They're human beings, even though they're supposed to have taken an oath to do no harm and help people. And it's their job to think about what is the best way to help their patients. That is not what they're doing. And if you recently, somebody sent to me Leonard Peikoff's essay, Medicine, the Death of a Profession. He wrote it in 1989, and it goes through how government intervention in medicine why it creates this conflict of interest and why doctors become just pawns of the government, even if they appear private. So I think that was 30 years ago. And we've had Obamacare since then, and a bunch of other regulations. Every year there's more and more regulations, and these agencies grow and grow and grow and take more power. So I encourage everybody to Google that, Medicine, Death of a Profession by objectivist Leonard Peikoff, because it really explains why you can't trust what your doctor is telling you unless you're at a cocktail party with him. And I would recommend get a private doctor in a private clinic who has disconnected themselves from the big corporations, because you're more likely to get a thinking doctor there. And try to meet one or two socially so that you can ask them what they really think. But a lot of them don't want to think, they're not thinking at all, because they can't, that would be too much of a conflict for them to understand it and then walk into a room and go, no, you should take this vaccine. Even if they knew that it was going to hurt them, like very few people I think would do that. They'll just blank out and they won't want to know. And they'll just read only what they're allowed to read. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So even at a cocktail party, they won't know, they won't have the information because they'll ignore it. And you just have to seek out the people that are still thinking. They're hard to find. I've learned that in my own case, that I learned it early on, that most doctors don't think, and they don't want to do anything outside of this sort of checklist.
No, they're WebMD.
They are literally WebMD. They're worse than that on the internet. And then they'll say to me, you can't trust you're coming in with your Googled, questions. And I'm like, dude, you're literally a checklist off of WebMD. And you're on my case for Googling something. So, but that's the nature of it. And it's taken me a lot of years to find good doctors, and I have them, but I have been confronted with a lot of bad doctors. And every time I have to go to the hospital, and last year it was 4 times, And this year it's already been once. Every time I go in, I'm scared to death because once I get admitted, I lose a certain amount of control, and I definitely lose control over which doctor is my doctor. And I could end up getting one of these really stupid schmucks who's also arrogant. And then I'm really in trouble.
Yeah.
Because then they won't treat me the way, they won't take my opinion into consideration at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really dangerous for somebody as sick as I was. And when I see that the third leading cause of death is medical error, that does not surprise me. And I'm sure it's 10 times or more what has actually gets recorded, because it's hard to prove
absolutely.
medical
You
error.
can't prove
Because
it. Absolutely. Those are the proven cases.
Those are only the proven cases, and it's the third leading cause of death. My guess is it's the number one cause of death, because every time I've been in the hospital, I've had to be extremely micromanaging. And I think to myself, what if I were so sick I couldn't think straight, or I was on so much medication, or I was in the ICU and I was intubated, and, you know, and now with COVID, you can't even have a family member in there monitoring what these crazy people are doing to you. And, and I'm also smart. And I know that there are people with IQs, you know, around 100 or lower. Oh my God. I mean, they're goners. This is what I think about, you know, like if you get wheeled into a hospital and you can't fight for yourself and you're stupid and you just do what they say, you have a chance of being really hurt and harmed by them. That is no joke. I'm sorry to say, but that is the state of the situation. So, okay, yeah. I've said that before, and now we're getting off on a tangent. But as a result, when this COVID stuff started and people started just following along, I'm like, what are you doing? Don't you know these people? They're not like gods. They're not, like, a lot of them are douchebags. Anyway. All right. We want to hear more about your local fight. So I think, yeah, maybe when you're ready to talk about it and you want to talk about it, but I know you're the kind of guy who like waits and wants it to be perfect before you talk about it. So I'm probably going to make you talk about it before you're ready to talk about it.
No, I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think I have a really good template. And I mean, the first advice is, if you're a person of action, get involved locally, because it will have an effect and you can find people. And I think there's layers that I figured out about how to do this, because I guarantee you're going to have like a Republican Party or something locally, and there's going to be some good people. There's going to be really bad people. So you got to kind of wade your way through that and figure out what's going on. So maybe we'll talk kind of about my steps, about how to think about this and how to do it. And I'm, you know, we've already attracted a ton of attention just like quickly with the doctors, some of the doctor stuff I'm doing. And you wouldn't believe the outpouring that came, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments of, oh my God, thank you. I'm glad someone's speaking out. I'm a nurse, I'm a doctor, I'm whatever. Please speak out for us.
That is so frightening. I really think that this huge amount of people are thinking along the same lines. And there's this small minority of these idiot, you know, high society people who are just part of the club. I have to mention one other thing. I think we've talked about Curtis Yarvin before.
Yeah.
He's that intellectual thinker. He was on Fox. He was on Tucker's hour-long interview at The Nation. And it was an incredibly good interview. He's a monarchist. I want to understand that a little bit better. I don't really understand his position, because it sounds more like the American system, but with a president with more authority. And that it's like hereditary. So
I have some deep thoughts about that. Maybe we can talk about it next time.
Yeah, I would love to have him on. I was just talking to a
friend about this.
I really want to have him on and talk about it. And I think he's accessible. So maybe we'll do that too. But yeah, let's talk about it. But he talks about this high society and there's what their deal is and what their psychology is and why these things seem so nuts and why they don't seem to make any sense. And he calls it the cathedral. It's really interesting. So go check out that interview. I think you'll understand what we're dealing with more, the irrational nature of this elite club, and that it's all about being in the club for them. And that goes for, this is why ARI is the way it is, because these academics and these people in this elite club, that's all they want, is to be in the club. They don't really want to be rational or think or do what's best. So,
yeah, one of his points is that we don't live in a democracy, nor should we. So it's an interesting take. I think he's absolutely right that we do not live in a democracy. We live in an oligarchy,
yeah,
a decentralized oligarchy. And his explanation for those power structures and why that is really fascinating. And
yeah,
we would disagree with him on some other things, but I think I don't think I could have arrived at the conclusion he arrived at without being able to think the way he does in terms of these power structures. And so it's really interesting.
right. Yeah. So I'll put a link to that video too, I think I can get a link to Fox Nation, but anyway, check it out. Fox Nation. His name is Curtis Yarvin. I guess that's it for today. We've really covered a lot of ground and we've been talking for
yeah, we're getting back into the
swing
of this. So
yeah. So, okay. Thanks for not turning off your phone ringer. And
we're rusty, man. We're getting back into it.
Okay, we'll see you next week. Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a good week.
With satire and fun.
All right.
It's been the demise of bad ideas, and we'll know what's right when she's done. So download this free podcast now and hear perspectives you may lack. It's concise and right and achieves world needs. Guaranteed all your money back. Last time, ready?